Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to wait just a little bit for people to continue joining, but please do get ready to start. Once again, thank you for joining this webinar entitled Collecting Student Input to Improve Student Engagement and Inclusion in the College Experience. My name is Latoya Dixon, and this is my sign name. My pronouns are she, her.
If I could, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Latoya. Would you mind holding for just a moment? We've noticed that the captioner is not set in Zoom, so we're trying to correct that before we continue.
Oh, okay, of course. Yes, of course.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. All right. Looks like we're good to go. Please continue, Latoya.
All right, I'll start over. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. We are so happy to have you here and to have you all join us. This webinar is entitled Collecting Student Input to Improve Student Engagement and Inclusion in the College Experience. My name is Latoya Dixon. This is my sign name. And I am an accessibility resource specialist here at the National Deaf Center. My pronouns are she and her, and I'll provide you with a visual description. I am a Black female, and I have black hair that's pulled back, and there are curls in the back. The sides are shaved. I am wearing a teal colored shirt, short sleeve with a pocket on the left-hand side, a silver chain, and silver hoops with 2 nose rings. And my background today is a dark blue color. And I will turn it over to Tia.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. My name is Tia Ivanko. I am the co-director here for the National Deaf Center, and I am thrilled to take an afternoon to present with my colleagues. Visual description for you. I am a Black female as well, brown hair. I have peach framed glasses today, gold hoops in my ears. My background is Black with a white top. Pronouns is she, her series as well. Before we jump into our discussion, we do have some housekeeping rules that we'd like to share. We will have voice interpreters and caption available as well. You can use Zoom or StreamText to connect to the captions. The link will be available in the chat box, and the StreamText you can view and adjust as needed. If you are trying to view on a mobile device, we do recommend utilizing a laptop or computer so that you can see clearly. This webinar will be presented by myself and my colleague. There will be a few polls throughout the webinar, and we do want your engagement. I will keep an eye on the chat box because there will be some additional information there as well. If you have questions, please do type in the Q&A. We will be able to respond there as needed. If you would like a certificate of participation, we do have badges that will be available at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please. Oh, I forgot to remind about that. Oh. Yes, so a few things that I should have discovered. We did the access check. I did let you know about the webinar format. We will be having a bit of engagement through polls and the chat box. And finally, we will share a bit more about our technical assistance and dissemination. It's just a disclaimer. We are funded by the Department of Education, Office of Special Ed Programs, and the content that we are sharing is not a sponsorship or it does not reflect the Department of Education. Their views, their policies are not reflected here. If we happen to mention, let's say, a name, a product, or an organization, that does not mean it is endorsed by the Department of Education or the US government as a whole. Today's agenda, you can see here on the right-hand side, collecting student input. We'll talk about the what, the why, the when, and the how. We'll move on to the next slide. Before we dive too deeply, I want to discuss why we're talking about student input. I work here at the National Deaf Center. We have set a goal to understand the experiences of deaf students throughout the United States. We're trying to understand and improve the barriers that they're facing and how they can be successful in their future collegiate careers. We do collect data in order to do so. There is some some current data that is existing that provides us with some information on the number of students and who are deaf or hard of hearing and enrolled in various colleges and universities, but it's not going to provide enough information about their experiences. Today, we'll be talking about the input, and it's going to be a little bit broad. It's not just feedback. Input would imply values in which the student is offered, and there's some intended collaboration and some goals for solutions. Now, feedback does not always warrant collaboration. That's just one way of thoughts or ideas or a way to view different circumstances. And we are working together to utilize that input as a whole, not just feedback. Student input is qualitative data. It provides information and in-depth experiences, including feedback, background, and details, help us to better understand how students are able to navigate both academic and social experiences in different environments. Often, colleges operate under a no news is good news framework, meaning if there's no major issues, that means all is well. However, we know that's often not the case. Actually, not collecting the appropriate information, let's say opportunities, or even documenting stories, experiences, perspective, inputs, or insights, can only offer a glimpse into those lived experiences that those students encounter daily. But we can also strengthen accessibility services and help students feel more included on campus and that sense of belonging. That's for students at their, respective institutions. The experiences, perspectives, opinions, they do value, and it adds to the subjective experiences for those involved. Next slide, please. So, to start off, I'd like to ask you within our audience, are you currently collecting student input? I am going to open an audience poll. Please do respond. We'll give you a moment or two to do so. Please answer here yes or no for our first poll. I see the numbers coming up. All righty. Okay, activity slowed down. I'll give you about 5 more seconds to respond to the poll if you haven't as of yet. All right, let's go ahead and share the results. So, of the people within our audience, we have about 32% who are collecting student input, but 68% who are not collecting that valuable information. So, you all who are collecting that student input, please use the chat and let us know how often that is being done. Is it once a year, once a semester, 2 times a semester? We'd like to see your experiences and get your feedback. Please enter that into the chat. Okay, I see an answer. Well, Latoya is going to sign the responses. Go ahead, Latoya.
Once a semester, each interaction or touch point, once a semester roughly, every 8 weeks, we send out a survey to get feedback. Once a semester. Another one, once a semester. Each interaction in that department, once a year, or when students leave campus. One person uses an access information management system to collect all kinds of information every semester. One person says they did before COVID, but have not done it since. Every time there is student input, maybe once a week or twice monthly. Twice at the beginning and then again at the end of the semester, and then at the end of each semester. So quite a variety there.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Let's move to the next slide.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the why behind collecting student input. As Tia previously mentioned, that data and research on deaf student experience in college settings is pretty limited. And what is available focuses on a small number of deaf students. So that means that it's limited to just a few experiences in only a handful of institutions. And that means we still do not have enough information collected about those experiences of deaf college students on a national level. We can see here at this slide, in 2019, which was pre-pandemic, 52% of students reported there was no formal feedback collected about their experiences. And that means that's unfortunate because that's a missed opportunity to interact with students, collect information, discuss with them, and learn about how to improve those student experiences. So in lieu of waiting for maybe a crisis or a situation that comes up that's urgent, student input can be collected regularly in order to inform practice and services. Collecting student input needs to have, you have to have a better understanding of those spectrums of experiences that deaf colleges are having, the students are having, what barriers they're facing, and maybe what needs they have, how they need help, and how we can effectively help strategize in order to support those students. Next slide, please. So NDC did a recent survey, and that was in 2022, 2023, that year. And we surveyed disability service providers about collecting feedback of those deaf students. at their institutions and what those responses were. They noted that when they do collect feedback, they're responsive to student needs. So we see here 33% said rated their office's ability to gather feedback from deaf students as poor or very poor. So they're not collecting that feedback. However, 63% rated their office's ability to use student feedback to improve deaf services as good or excellent. So that means that collecting student input is important because you can really use that information to help make decisions and to really use that for evidence-based practice. Student input is considered data. And that data can tell you a story about what students are experiencing at those respective campuses on those at those individual campuses. So actively seeking student input is going to be very important in regards to inclusion as well as equitable participation on campus and for that college experience overall, as well as for the academic and personal success of deaf students. It's so, so important. Next slide, please. So we're going to open the chat again, and we would like to know about your campuses. How do you use information that you collect from students, from different deaf students, or different students on your campus? How do you use that information? Do you gather the information, and after you've done that, what do you do with it? So please respond by typing in the chat. Go ahead and type in the chat box. Okay, we're wondering, how do you use that information that you collect from students? What kind of things do you do with that information?
So we have someone mentioning different points discussed at staff meetings to try and come up with action step. I teach mostly high school students. Information gathered is used to draft the IEP. Try to talk to friends and family so that more awareness can be spread. Next, we have to support the need for HLC Academy, as well as notate issues that have come up from students to improve those things in future years, and information to allocate funds to different needs and situations. It's an additional, also to help students solve problems they encounter and how to advocate for themselves best. Let's see. We have a student survey of instruction that all students have the option to fill out. It does not identify the deaf or hard of hearing students, but that is one way to collect data. Last person just mentioned use the information to improve how I help students, how I can help my service providers improve. Let's see, access management information allows us to see how many students have requested their accommodations. We can then pull those reports on how many students will have specific disabilities, and then how many deaf, hard of hearing, deaf blind, etc. It also allows us to track when students are a no-show and how many appointments, intake, and follow-ups we have done. Another person mentioned transitional assessments like TAGG. Another person is mentioning listening inventory for education. So that's one way to help respond to assessments, evaluations for students and their plan. Yes. So we noted that accommodation management system in use for several people. It's been commented. Thank you for sharing, everyone.
Yes, thank you. All right, next slide, please. So as I just mentioned, that data that we use and that you collect can tell a story. So with that being said, collecting student input and analyzing that data, not just collecting it, but also analyzing it, really does help practitioners and institutions. And it does that by allowing us to see patterns and shared experiences to inform those decisions. And what also to identify opportunities for growth and innovation, which in turn, allows us to identify those opportunities as well as barriers and challenges that we need to address.
And this is Tia. Again, I hate to interrupt, but it seems that we are still having issues with captions within the Zoom. We have gotten a request to please pause and allow the caption issue to be resolved.
So Captioner, if you can enable the API token so that we can see the captions in Zoom as well as stream text.
I apologize. It's not working on my end, so I can only do through stream text. Really apologize.
Okay, this is Tia speaking. So, to let everyone know, we do apologize for the technical difficulties. However, captions will be available on stream text. They will not be available within the Zoom. We will post the link again so that you have that option so that you can adjust the captions as needed. Again, we do apologize for the technical difficulties. That's what happens when you're live. My apologies.
Okay, so I'll review some of the comments we just made. Collecting data can help us to see those different patterns as well as different trends that are happening on campuses. And then that leads to being able to see and identify different opportunities where perhaps barriers exist and how to remove those barriers and how to address those challenges in order to remove those barriers. So barriers and challenges involves examining what needs to be measured in order to help us know why we need to collect that data. So maybe you may not be collecting data without a reason behind it. So that gives you an idea to think, therefore, what will we do? So there should always be a reason behind that data collection. Collecting different types of input also allows us to allocate resources more efficiently to see how we can make offices or certain areas or even the entire campus more successful, more accessible. Collecting data allows us to hold ourselves accountable as well. And that refers to also, allowing us to use our resources more efficiently, measuring progress, and holding ourselves accountable to see that if there is a problem or an issue, how do we address it? How do we resolve it? How do we improve it? And ultimately, it ensures that decisions are based on evidence so that we're not just coming up with solutions. We're not just coming up with data, but we actually have collected that data. There's evidence that shows a certain trend based on feedback from students that they have provided. And that ultimately leads to better outcomes for deaf students and better outcomes for accessibility, and for the learning environment overall for everyone. Next slide, please.
All right, we'll go ahead and move to the next slide. One of the most important parts, or shall I say benefits, from collecting student input is developing a strong relationship with the students themselves. That includes trusting and being authentic within those relationships. Establishing constant and ongoing feedback loops do help students feel included and their experiences valued. Students will feel an additional feeling of respect from those who around them and being viewed as a person. Creating intentional space to learn from students or even experts because they do know what's best in their own lives. Gives a way to shift some of the power differentials from the disability support services and students relationships. When students know that you are invested and understand how their input will be used, they will be more likely to share additional means, and they may be willing to offer additional bits of feedback. They'll be more willing to approach you rather than waiting until a crisis does occur. Students will be able to recognize that their input is valuable and it helps to continue to build trust and opportunities for transparency. The foundation is truly beneficial for the students in the life cycle of their collegiate experiences. Next slide, please. So, all in all, this is why we want to share the key values of collecting input. When you're discussing what should that look like? With student input in general, the process should be continuous. You want to ensure that you are collecting that input at various times and then make changes based on what you've learned from those individuals. The initial collection, we do recommend making a connection with those students. Learn from them from the beginning, their accommodations, their experiences, all of that should be gathered during the initial conversation that you have with the students. You're establishing value in what they have to offer from the beginning. Sitting down, having that rapport is beneficial and it allows the student and the provider to pivot from past, let's say, experiences that may not have been the best. And with students, they're able to be involved and typically they're not used to that. In the school context, they're not able to share their true feelings and have their patients be recognized as well. Next, collecting input during the semester. During the semester itself, things change. So you want to make sure that information is collective. It's an informative data collection that will help improve and, of course, take that experience and that feedback to make those adjustments as needed. That information collected can help to make determinations of the successfulness of services, or for the students, if they need new accommodations, we can help explore that as well. So allow students to recognize if this accommodation is successful or not. Engage with them and check into different ways to ensure that they're having an equitable experience. And last but not least, we talk about summative learning, or what they learn overall at the end of the semester. Give a chance for reflection. for sharing their feelings and to recognize what's going to happen next, for example, next semester. Maybe there are some changes that are needed for policy or services. At the end of semester, it's always nice to just take that opportunity to reconnect and engage with the students, thinking about the time that you all have spent throughout the last year. Let's move on to the next slide.
All right, so shifting to talk about specific tools for collecting input. Now, there are lots of different formats in which you can collect student input. Probably the most common ones, the top 3 ones are surveys, focus groups, and interviews. So those are the top 3 most common. Surveys, we know, are asking questions of students. And a focus group can be facilitated conversations with a smaller group about a specific topic. Interviews are more of one-on-one conversations that go into more depth about a particular topic or experience in order to gain more information from that individual that you're interviewing. Now, formal and informal check-ins. Formal check-ins are more of finding a scheduled time when you can sit down with that person in person or virtually, depending on which way you want to go. In the virtual world, it's very easy to have those kinds of formal meetings. If it's something that's informal, it may be perhaps that, passing through campus, you bump into somebody and you just do a quick check-in with that person to make sure that everything is okay. Now, the thing to be cautious of with those informal check-ins is confidentiality. You have to be cautious of that, not to disclose any information, but just general questions about how the student is doing and just checking in. It's not particularly in depth. If you want something that's more in depth, then a formal check-in may be more in line of what you're looking for. Evaluations. Now, that may be asking individuals to rate something specific, meaning, for example, perhaps access, a particular service, a particular project. And access could refer to maybe a virtual experience that they had or an event on campus, how that went. A service could be, for example, interpreting services. How are interpreting services going for you in classes? A product, such as an assistive listening device. So those are those different aspects. And it's important to maximize that evaluation collection process by incorporating open-ended questions instead of single answer questions that will just elicit a yes or a no or a good or not that great. You really want to get deeper information from that person about those services or products. And if it's not good, then why? Or if it is good, then why? It's important that it's not just a closed-end question that's not going to give you a lot of information. Surveys and rating scales, that's when you're asking questions to gather information to really understand their opinions and experiences. The positive on that, the pro on that, is that it's really easy and quick to collect information from a large group of people. You can do that fairly easily in a short time. Now, and those numbers can really justify needs for XYZ that you're looking for, right? Now, the con to doing that is difficulty developing well-written questions. Not just coming up with any old question that might not get you a lot of information. You have to be very thoughtful about that. And sometimes that data can become very overwhelming. You may be collecting so much data that you may not know what to do with it because you are collecting from a large number of people. And so with all this data, it can feel very overwhelming to process. So just make sure that you could also consider using a checklist to try and identify what may be missing, what you have, what you may need to adjust or add. Now, checklists, those can be used to supplement your data collection. And you can have different criteria to kind of think about what you're looking for. You could have different tasks or items that you are tracking to confirm specific requirements that you are looking for, that you have or don't have. You can incorporate all of those into a checklist. And then for lastly, student forums. Student forums are sort of like focus groups, but almost like in a town hall format where you invite students to come and you have a specific dialogue with students and you have a conversation facilitator with that shared goal to have this discussion. So you want to be careful that you don't go off point, that you do stay on topic, and your facilitator can help you do that. Make sure they elicit data and that everybody is able to participate and be involved in the meeting. Next slide, please.
Next, we'd like to offer you just a bit of information and strategies for when you do collect that input from your students. One being sometimes that old-fashioned thing works, paper and pen, and then keep the documents available. Let's say at the front desk, if a student comes in, and allow them to respond immediately. Or if you sit and have a one-on-one with a student within disability service offices or another office throughout campus, have those readily available so that you can capture their thoughts. You can also consider using a feedback form as an opportunity for information gathering on your website. You can allow them to pull it up and type it out there on the spot, or send it to them and allow them to complete it later on. Share links to forms and taglines on your email or on your responses. For example, where we have our name, our role, the department, why not add a link to collect input or feedback right there within your email signature? It's more spontaneous for students, but it may be an opportune way to collect that information. Creating a quick, simple checkbox style inquiry, just a few questions that can also allow space for detailed responses. You can also consider using different types of platforms, maybe Instagram, perhaps via text question, yay or nay. And we've seen that different types of surveys throughout the years. Press 1 for yes or 2 for no. That may be a creative method to capture that information in a different modality. That way, you're still gathering feedback from the students, some via text, some via type, some via sign, perhaps. Have a variety of options for the students so that you can provide opportunities for them. You may also want to include face-to-face discussions and feedback. So choose any type of platform, let's say Marco Polo, to allow students to video themselves and send their feedback or responses to you. That way they can share their thoughts in their first language and they don't feel limited by having to respond in English only. Next slide, please. All right, we're actually going 2 slides.
Okay, we'll talk about challenges. Kind of a summary of what we know. This is the hard or difficult part. We encourage you to make better decisions, right? To use the data to do that. And we understand the demands of serving numerous students. And we recognize also that gathering input requires time, effort, and resources. And we do know that, absolutely, especially because you serve so many students, right? However, the investment It does take time and effort and resources in order to conduct this data collection, but it will absolutely be worth it in the end. The payoff will be great because you'll have new data, new information that you did not have before. So we definitely know it does take time, but it is well worth it. And that step of collecting data means that you have to be very proactive. You have to be willing to capture issues and make sure that you are meeting, different effective accommodations and building relationships with those students. And we know and recognize that students may not always be willing to provide feedback or to participate. They may not respond. They may not be motivated to participate in this data collection. We definitely know that as well. But overall, we are overwhelmed by, flooding of surveys. Sometimes that does happen. But if you are strategic and think through this carefully, and devise that plan, you can devise this in a way that students will respond. So it's important to develop that strategy and that plan. So therefore, it's important to, if you want to collect data on XYZ, that with that data, you actually follow through with those commitments and what you said you were going to do after collecting that data instead of dropping the ball. So if you plan to collect data, what do you plan to do with that data? Whatever that plan is, it's important to actually finish that process and finish what you started and actually enact those plans. Third, lack of engagement with students, low response rates. That could happen for a variety of reasons. Maybe there was a lack of action from the last time they completed the survey. Maybe they did fill out a survey previously and they noticed that nothing changed. And so they may feel like, well, why did you ask for this information? I responded and I'm not seeing a change. So what is the impact or the change as a result of that survey? So it's important that when you do collect that data, that you consider what result you want to happen from that. Is there a specific change? Is there a change in communication? What exactly will be the goal of that? And the key is transparency. So collecting data, it's important to be transparent about what you plan to do with it. Now, allow space for dialogue for students so that they can make those informed decisions. Next slide, please. Collecting data involves different strategies and different techniques, but we did want to share some tips for success in doing this. So first of all, creativity. We did mention different types of ways that you could do this collection. So that's important to be creative instead of doing the same thing, the same old thing every time. Think about how you are actually collecting data. As we mentioned, it could be face-to-face, it could be through email, it could be through social media. There are a variety of ways. So it's important to think about the different ways that you could engage students and keep up with current trends as well. What's happening? What are students doing? You could add another idea to throw out there is at the end of the semester, you could do an email blast to all students who are registered with the office and just sent out a blast, like a reminder kind of thing. And so they get that at the end of the semester. And, that's something that maybe they haven't seen before and they may be more apt to engage with that. And deaf students, they already know their modes of communication, whether it be sign language or visual language. And so that way, if there's a question, you could provide it in a visual language as well in the survey. So you could have, like, for example, a picture-in-picture with a video picture-in-picture. a deaf student using ASL. And if they see that, they may be very motivated to participate. They may think to themselves something like, well, gosh, they considered my method of communication in the survey. And that may make them feel good and more motivated and appreciative of that extra step. Building trust in relationships with students is important. Being authentic. So really being thoughtful about the current power dynamics and how you might connect and build those relationships with students, and also be transparent in that process. Having a purpose for that feedback and letting the students know, like, hey, this is the way that your feedback is going to be used for this, that, or the other. We're going to make these improvements. We're going to make these changes, so that the students aren't thinking that you're asking just for the sake of asking, and they may not have a lot of interest in responding if so. It means paying attention to time as well. It is a time of the year when students are very busy, or is it not? And this may be a good opportunity for you to ask those questions. Third, just re-emphasizing again what Tia had mentioned about data collection being ongoing. It's not a one and done kind of thing. This needs to be ongoing and consistent for data collection. Now, fourth, exploring different formats, adding different ideas. And now we know that many students use phones, right, for everything. So why not incorporate that, right? Use QR codes. Students may talk with you, and if you have, for example, a QR code right there, they can just take a photo of that QR code, pop up that survey on their phone, answer it really quickly. You may also share the survey on your website or on social media. And again, it's about how to be creative and how to engage students. So paper and pencil surveys may not be enough. Think about other ways that you could incorporate the survey in different formats. So data collection involves student participation, but it doesn't mean that it's just that action of the Disability Service Office. It should involve collaboration and partnership from all departments in campus, on the campus. So they should all be involved in this data collection, and it should not be the sole responsibility of the Disability Service Office. So that being said, collaboration between departments and offices are important and can help push for general improvements, student engagement throughout the entire campus. So we've provided a variety of tips and tools and resources, and keep in mind that it is the institution's responsibility to have this systematic process in place to collect and respond to feedback. And by following these strategies and centering deaf students' experiences and perspectives, that means you can work together towards creating a more accessible and equitable college experience for deaf students on campuses.